What's up, guys? Hope you're having a good day. In this video, we're going to be breaking down all of the main card fights from this weekend's UFC Fight Night Dern versus Yan card. Really sorry this upload is coming late to you this week. I was sick earlier on in the week, had sore throat, blocked nose, cough, that kind of thing, which made recording the videos harder. Still a little bit groggy, you can probably tell. But yeah, man, feeling good. We're back. Again, sorry it's late, but better late than never. And if you like this video, please hit the like and subscribe button. If you want to watch breakdown videos for all the prelims on this card, head on over to my website, MMABettingTips.com. Link for that in the description below. And also, I've got a bonus video dropping tomorrow for you. So if you like betting on sports, you like betting on football, check that out. Be dropping it on Saturday. So, you don't have to watch it Saturday. Come back, check it out next week, something like that. But that might be of interest to you. So check that one out. Gonna quickly run through the spiel about this not being financial advice. I'm not telling you what to do. It's very important to gamble responsibly. It is brutally difficult making money betting on sports. So do your own research, understand that, and just be very careful. When you go online, it seems like everyone's making money. You go on Twitter, everyone seems to be a pro gambler. You got all these ballers on Instagram wearing diamond chains in their Gucci tracksuits with big bundles of cash driving around in Bentleys. It's all bollocks, man. It is all bollocks. It is all bollocks. The only way to make money in this game is being chained to a desk, working hard, doing a lot of research, putting a hard time in, man. That's the way you do it. So yeah, do your own research. Really put a lot of thought into the bets you're thinking of placing. If you are going to bet this weekend, then good luck to you, man. I hope you crush it. What I would say is, I've been making a living live betting UFC for a long time now, and all the information I'm going to be sharing with you in this video is come from hours and hours and hours of research that I've put into these fights. So I've got a lot of experience doing this. I've spent a lot of time specifically on this card studying these fighters this week. So while you should do your own research, and I'm not telling you what to do, just know at the same time that the information I'm sharing with you here is coming from a good place. A lot of experience, a lot of hard work's gone into it. So let's crack in. Let's jump into the first fight, which is going to be Mackenzie Dern against Yan, which is a really interesting main event. Good stylistic matchup. Classic striker versus grappler matchup as well. And the winner of this fight is going to take a massive step towards that strawweight title picture. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Mackenzie Dern is the favourite at average odds of around 1.40, which is minus 250 for an implied probability of 71%. If we take a look at the odds on Yan Xiaonan, she is around an average of 3.0, which is going to be plus 200 for an implied probability of 33%. So Mackenzie Dern is 29 years old, 5'4" with a 63-inch reach, and Xiaonan Yan is 33 years old, 5'5" with a 63-inch reach. So there's no real X factors to talk about here. Both girls roughly the same size. I guess the only thing that I would kind of cover is that even though Yan's been in the UFC for a few years now, I still feel like there's the perception that she's kind of like this rising star in the strawweight division. But at 33 years old, it's kind of too late for her. 33 years old is pretty old for a strawweight. We know that fighters tend to decline sooner in their careers in the lighter weight classes. And so Yan hasn't really lived up to her potential yet. She still has a lot of weaknesses in her game. And at 33 years old, from here, it's unlikely that she's going to be improving. I'd expect her to plateau now and then slowly start to decline. Mackenzie Dern, on the other hand, is 29 years old, so she's at that stage in her career where the period of rapid improvement is probably done for Dern, but she's still at that age where she could get better over the next few years. But again, that rate of improvement in her late 20s is going to be slowing down now. What's actually really disappointing about Mackenzie Dern is that I don't want to write her off. I don't want to be really critical of Mackenzie Dern because she's still got a good number of years left in her to really make a run at that title. Good few years left to improve weaknesses that she's got to give her the best chance of winning the belt if she does get the title shot. But I do feel like Mackenzie Dern's made some bad decisions in her career which have significantly reduced the probability of her reaching her potential. And specifically what I'm talking about is Dern's inability to wrestle. So we know that she's an absolutely elite Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner. She is as good as it gets when it comes to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. She's by far the highest level female fighter that I've ever seen with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. She's unbelievable. Like, watching her is an absolute pleasure. She's spectacular on the ground. The problem with Dern is that she has absolutely no wrestling whatsoever. She just cannot get girls to the ground. She really, really struggles. Her only opportunities to get fights to the ground where she can use that ultra high level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is hoping that her opponents make a mistake, and she just hopes that she's going to be able to make them pay for it. Maybe she can catch a kick, or they slip and fall to the ground, or maybe they expose their back against the cage, or she can jump on their back and go for a back take. But generally speaking, her wrestling is really, really, really lacking, which is crazy, really, because if she just had like an average level of wrestling, I think she'd be an absolute nightmare. I think she'd be more than capable of becoming champion. When you look at how bad, someone like Zhang struggled on the ground against Rose Namajunas when they last fought. If Dern actually had a bit of wrestling, she'd be able to get so many of these girls in the division down and just absolutely terrorize them on the ground. But she just cannot get fights to the ground. She really struggles with that. And when Dern first came into the UFC all the way back in 2018, for the most part, she was a pure Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner, right? She didn't really have much striking. Her striking was very green and sloppy. And again, her wrestling was non-existent. If the fight went to the ground, she was a nightmare, but she often struggled to get fights to the ground. That's why she lost to Amanda Ribas. That's why the Ashley Yoder fight was close, went to a split decision. But then Dern started working with Jason Perillo, and he improved her striking a lot. Dern's striking's got exponentially better over the last 4 years, but I feel that's where she made a mistake. I know that striking was a big weakness for her, but I feel if she would have focused more on her wrestling than her striking, her weaknesses in striking wouldn't have mattered that much, because very few girls in the division would have been able to stop her from taking them down. So I understand why Dern worked hard on her striking to improve it, and it's paid dividends because she looks an order of magnitude better on the feet now. But I feel that not having that wrestling to connect her striking and grappling is a real deal breaker for Dern. Whereas if she would have focused on her wrestling, yes, she would have been hyper specific, a true specialist in the game, but she would have been so formidable in that department that her lack of striking probably wouldn't have mattered. So I do feel that was a bit of a bad decision. And of course, with Dern working with Jason Perillo, who's predominantly a striking-based coach, and with her being 29 years old now, she hasn't improved her wrestling up until this point in her career. You've got to ask the question, will she ever? Like, if it hasn't happened in the last 4 years, when is it going to happen? She's been in the UFC for a long time now. So it's disappointing with Dern, and the reason why I wanted to bring that up is because the outcome of this fight does hinge on whether Dern is going to be able to get this fight to the ground or not. Because if the fight stays standing, Zhao Nanyan moves well on the feet. She's reasonably technical when it comes to striking. She's got good combinations, fight at a decent pace, good volume. She's a lot more technical than Dern. But what I do like about Dern is that she's tough, she's scrappy, she's got the dog in her. She loves to come forward, take control of the centre of the octagon, pressure her opponents, and just overwhelm them with volume. And this is one of her strategies for getting fights to the ground. This kind of Royce Gracie-esque. If you go back and watch the very, very early UFCs, Royce Gracie didn't have any striking either. But what he would do is put a lot of pressure on his opponents in the hope that if he kept pressure in them, they'd eventually make a mistake that he could jump on and capitalize. So Dern utilizes the same strategy. She knows she's not the best wrestler. She's not going to be shooting single legs and double legs, or she can try, but not that effective with them. So she just overwhelms her opponents with pressure, and she's tough enough to keep coming forward, walking through those shots, taking damage, in the hope that if she keeps doing that, eventually an opportunity is going to pop up for her. And for the most part, it's been quite a successful strategy. And you know what? I expect it to be a successful strategy this weekend as well. I do think Dern wins this fight a very high percentage of the time. And for that reason, I've bet Mackenzie Dern this week. Now, I haven't bet Mackenzie Dern at these odds. I bet her earlier in the week when she was closer to 1.50 minus 200. But if you haven't bet Dern already, even though she's a big favourite, I do think she's a pretty good bet this weekend. Now, you guys know if you watch my content a lot, generally speaking, I don't like to bet big favourites in MMA, but occasionally when I see really favourable matchups for a fighter, I will do it. Of course, I recommended a bet on Corey Sandhagen on the last event. He did very well against Song Yadong, and I'm hoping that Dern once again can, do well for me this weekend. But the reason why I like Dern in this fight is that even though Yan is the more technical striker, because of Dern's work rate, aggression, pace on the feet, I do think that while Dern will likely take more damage and will likely get outstruck on the feet, I do feel she can hold her own and hang in there. I don't feel like Yan is going to totally outclass Dern on the feet, just because Dern is tough enough and scrappy enough to hang in there and, use her aggression and pressure to make things uncomfortable for Yan at times. When it comes to this fight, though, I'm not betting Mackenzie Dern because I expect her to have success on the feet. Obviously, that would be very foolish. Reason why I'm betting Mackenzie Dern is because even though her offensive wrestling's not very good, and even though Zhao Ninyan's takedown offense isn't awful, Zhao Ninyan's takedown offense also isn't bulletproof. She does at times give up cheap takedowns, and when you put Yan on the ground, she is ultra low level. Like she's so bad, it's like she's never even taken a jiu-jitsu class. Like really bad on the ground. If you put her on her back, she has no idea how to work her way back up to her feet. No idea how to defend herself on the ground. So she's not that easy to take down. But if you get her down, I mean, she's like a beached whale. You could literally do whatever you want to her. She just cannot defend herself. She just doesn't have the skills, doesn't have the knowledge. Which, of course, is a bad situation to find yourself in against the best Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner I've ever seen in women's MMA. Like, Dern is absolutely elite. So the reason why I really like Dern in this fight, the reason why I'm going to be betting Dern this weekend, is because Zhao Ninyan has got to be perfect for 25 minutes. With how big the skill gap is on the ground, with how aggressive Dern is with her submission attempts on the ground, with how fast-paced her jiu-jitsu is. If this fight goes to the ground at any time in those 25 minutes, and Dern has 1 or 2 minutes to work, there is a very, very high probability that Yan will be submitted, because Dern attacks with so many different submissions. She just overwhelms her opponents with setups and different attacks. She's extremely difficult to train for because the speed at which she moves. And you need to give her the tiniest little opening and she'll jump all over it and capitalise. And so I'm not betting Mackenzie Dern this weekend because I think she's going to be able to outstrike Yan. I'm not betting Mackenzie Dern this weekend because I think she's going to be able to take Yan down in 3 out of 5 rounds and win a decision with her grappling. I'm betting on Mackenzie Dern because I don't think Yan's fight IQ or takedown defense is good enough to keep the fight standing for 25 minutes. I think at some point, Yan will give up a cheap takedown. At some point, she'll make a mistake. And when she does that, Dern is going to strangle her to death or tear a limb off. And that's how I see this going down. So, there are risk factors with betting Dern. But I do think it is a good stylistic matchup. And the fact that Dern's odds have been steadily declining all week, I think reflect the fact that Dern probably get this done, man. So hope you found that useful. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Will you be betting this fight? How do you feel about it? Let me know what you think. Remember, Dern does struggle to get fights to the ground, but you only need 1 takedown in 25 minutes, and Yan is going to be in a world of trouble. So now let's talk about the next fight on this card, which is going to be Randy Brown against Francisco Trinaldo. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Randy Brown is one of the biggest favourites on the card Average odds are around 1.31, which is going to be minus 323 for an implied probability of 76%. If we take a look at the odds on Francisco Trinaldo, he's around an average of 3.60, which is going to be plus 260 for an implied probability of 28%. So Randy Brown, 32 years old, 6'3", with a 78-inch reach, and Francisco Trinaldo, 44 years old, 5'9", with a 70-inch reach. So we got some big X factors for us to dig into here. The first being their age. At 44 years old, Trinaldo is probably in the top 3 oldest fighters in the UFC, and we know that this is a young man's game. There are not many 40-year-olds fighting in the UFC for a reason. So Trinaldo, way past his prime, and in the last few years has shown signs of significant decline. He's not as aggressive as he used to be, can't take a shot like he used to, just doesn't see the shots coming. He's not as sharp like he used to be. His reflexes aren't there. Doesn't have the same pop in his shots. He's not as fast. Trinaldo was one of these guys that went his entire career without really ever getting rocked, dropped, wobbled or knocked out. It was very, very rare where you'd see Trinaldo hurt in fights. But over the last couple of years, we've seen him frequently get wobbled, which is also a sign that his chin is starting to go. So Trinaldo, definitely on a steep decline, which you'd expect for someone who's 44 years old. And we know that at that stage in his career, he's going to be getting worse from fight to fight. Father Time's undefeated, and that's just the way it is. You can't cheat Mother Nature. Randy Brown, on the other hand, at 32 years old, is a guy that's been rapidly improving over the last few years. So both these guys are on very opposite career trajectories. Brown is making big improvements from fight to fight. Trinaldo should be making, a big step backwards from fight to fight, should be declining. So with Trinaldo being 44 years old, Brown being 32 years old, there's a 12-year age gap in this fight, and statistically the younger fighter wins 70% of the time, 7-0, when there's a 12-year age gap in a fight. So straight away, statistically, that gives Brown a pretty big edge in this matchup. But we also know the size matters in MMA, and at 6'3" with a 78-inch reach, Brown is absolutely huge for the welterweight division, whereas Francisco Trinaldo at 5'9" with a 70-inch reach is one of the smallest welterweights in the division. Of course, he used to fight at lightweight. So this gives Brown a massive advantage here. Not only will he absolutely tower over Trinaldo and probably have an advantage in terms of physicality for this fight, which is something that may not have been as big of a factor earlier in Trinaldo's career when he was more of a tank, but at this stage in their careers, Brown should be the bigger, stronger, more physically imposing fighter. And on top of that, to go with it, he has an 8-inch reach advantage, which is huge for a guy like Randy Brown, who likes to fight long and knows how to use that reach. Brown's got great footwork, great movement, really nice leg kicks, a great jab, and Brown can chip away and land really nasty, damaging strikes with those leg kicks and jabs from a range where Trinaldo's going to have to cover a lot of distance to get inside and try and land on Brown, which is not going to be easy for Trinaldo to do, because at this stage in his career where his reflexes are starting to go, you can see that he sees the openings now. He still tries to let his hands go in the same way that he used to, but he's just a little bit off the pace and quite often misses opportunities to pull the trigger. So Trinaldo doesn't let his hands go as much as he used to, doesn't have the same timing, the same reaction times, which will make it a lot harder for him to actually land on the longer, taller, sharper, faster, more technically skilled opponent in Randy Brown this weekend. So this is one of those fights where Randy Brown is a big favourite, and he deserves to be a big favourite, because in my opinion at this stage in their careers, Brown is better than Trinaldo everywhere. Trinaldo arguably could have some success with his wrestling in this fight. Randy Brown's takedown offense isn't amazing. However, it isn't going to be easy for a guy that's 5'9" to take down and hold down someone that is 6'3". And even if Trinaldo were to have a little bit of success with his grappling in this fight, Randy Brown has got a decent level of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so he should be able to defend himself on the ground just fine. It's not like he's going to be at much risk of being submitted or anything like that. And on top of that, Trinaldo's one of these guys that also burns himself out very quickly when he grapples. So if he were to come in with a grappling heavy game plan, he'd probably get tired pretty quickly and screw things up for him in the striking department. So Brown doesn't really have anything to worry about here on the ground. And then we've already said on the feet, Brown's got so many advantages. He should be able to light Trinaldo up and outstrike him by a really wide margin. I think the only real risk factor in this fight is that Brown has been a little bit chinny throughout his career. It doesn't take much to hurt this guy on the feet. Now, in the past, if you hurt him on the feet, he would kind of cave. And I hate to use the word quit. It's a horrible word to use. But in the past, if you hurt Brown on the feet, it was a lot easier to get him out of there. In recent years, he's really toughened up. He's really got that doggedness about him now. That real strong will to win, the determination. There's no quitting him. So it's not as easy to put him away these days as he used to be. He's an absolute nightmare these days. So even if Trinaldo were to hurt him on the feet, it's not going to be as easy as it used to be to get him out of there. But we do know that guys that are abnormally long and tall for the division often can't take a shot that well. If you think of guys like James Vick, Stefan Struve, these long, tall, abnormally tall guys for the division, usually a little bit chinny. Don't want to call Randy Brown chinny, but I wouldn't say he's like that durable either. And power's the last thing to go. We know Trinaldo can still crack, so that is a risk factor. But ultimately, with the size difference, with how technical Brown is, and with how much Trinaldo's declined, the probability of Trinaldo landing a shot, knocking Brown out, isn't that high. So it's a great stylistic matchup for Brown, and the odds reflect that. It's a great fight for him because he has pretty much every single advantage you could want in an MMA contest. He's younger, he's got a big size advantage, he's got a better gas tank, he's a better striker and a better grappler at this stage in their careers. Should be a very easy night's work for Brown, and I would be very, very surprised if he were to lose this. Of course, from a betting point of view, it's not that interesting because you've got to put up a lot of money to get any kind of meaningful return on Brown. It only takes one shot to knock him out. I mean, it is very unlikely he wins, but I do feel many of Brown's advantages are kind of baked into the odds. So, if you are betting on Brown this weekend, I guess just be aware of the fact that, anything can happen in MMA, and you're paying a big price for betting a guy with a lot of advantages, which you'd expect, right? You guys know what I'm trying to say. It's a risky strategy betting big favourites in MMA. But anyway, I hope you found that useful. Now let's break down the next fight, which is going to be Ronnie Barcelos against Trevin Jones. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Ronnie Barcelos is another big favourite at average odds of around 1.40, which is going to be minus 250 for an implied probability of 71%. We take a look at the odds on Trevin Jones. He is around an average of 3.0, which is going to be plus 200 for an implied probability of 33%. So Ronnie Barcelos is 35 years old, 5'7" with a 67-inch reach, and Trevin Jones is 32 years old, 5'7" with a 70-inch reach. So both guys roughly the same age, roughly the same size. No major X factors here, but I do just want to quickly touch on the fact that 35 years old is quite old for a bantamweight. We said earlier on when we were talking about Zhao and Yan that the lighter weight classes are all about speed, reflexes and athleticism, which tend to be the first things to go as you start to get older. So mid-30s for a bantamweight is pretty old. So Barcelos is getting to that stage in his career where you could start to see him decline now. And he didn't perform well at all in his last fight against Victor Henry. He did significantly underperform. Now, I don't want to write a fighter off and judge them based on one bad performance, because there's lots of reasons why Barcelos might have underperformed. He might have been fighting injured, might have had a bad weight cut, maybe just wasn't feeling it that night, maybe performance anxiety got the better of him, maybe he got hurt early on in the fight and as a result wasn't able to perform to his full potential. But he didn't really show up against Victor Henry and showcase what he's capable of. So at 35 years old, that could be the first sign of a decline, but we won't know for sure until we see him this weekend and we get a look at him, against Trevin Jones. We'll have to wait and see. But if you are thinking of betting Barcelos this weekend, I would just exercise a little bit of caution, because he did not fight to his full potential against Henry. He's capable of so much more. But based on how these two guys match up stylistically, on Barcelos' entire body of work throughout his career, this is a good stylistic matchup for him, because he has some decent advantages over Trevin Jones, which is reflected in him being a big favourite in this fight. So both guys are primarily strikers, but they've got very different styles of striking. Barcelos likes to fight at a high pace. He likes to come forward and use boxing combinations to force you to exchange. He's got good boxing, good hand speed, good pop in his shots, and he's technical. Trevin Jones, on the other hand, is one of these guys that doesn't really throw a particularly high volume of strikes and is much more of a counter striker who likes to stand back and react to what you're doing. But Jones's real strength is every once in a while he'll kind of hulk out and blitz forward with a big, powerful blitzing attack. And he's very fast, he's very athletic, he's very powerful. So if you don't read that blitzing attack coming, he can cause you big problems with it. And of course, that's how he was able to KO Mario Bautista literally out of nowhere. So Jones is a very, very dangerous guy on the feet. Now, Ronnie Barcelos is tough as nails. If you take a look at his record, you can see that he's never been knocked out. He's had almost 20 pro fights, and he's lost 2 decisions, and he's been submitted. So Barcelos has never been knocked out. He's a tough guy with good boxing defense and a good chin, but he's also getting up there in age. Jones is a fast, explosive, dangerous guy. Again, like we were saying with the last fight with Randy Brown, only takes one shot to knock a dude out. Jones definitely has that knockout power. Timur Valiev and Mario Bautista found that out the hard way. But on the feet, because Jones doesn't throw a particularly high volume of strikes, and because Barcelos fights at a high pace, I would expect Barcelos to outstrike Jones on the feet this weekend. Now, when it comes to grappling, this is an area where Barcelos can absolutely dominate. He's got an enormous advantage over Jones on the ground. Barcelos is a high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt with good offensive wrestling, good MMA grappling. Trevin Jones' takedown offense isn't great. His ground game's not that great either. And the skill gap between these two on the ground will be absolutely huge. The problem with Barcelos is that he's one of these strong grapplers that just doesn't grapple as much as he should. We've seen him many times in the past go up against opponents where he's clearly the better grappler, and if he used a grappling heavy game plan, he would win very easily. But instead, he chooses to stand and bang, which would be a big mistake against Trevin Jones. I'm not saying Barcelos won't win a stand-up fight, he probably will, but what I am saying is the fight would be a lot easier for him if he were to choose to grapple in this one. He just really doesn't, but he will have a big advantage on the ground. So again, this fight is very similar to Trinaldo versus Randy Brown stylistically, in that Barcelos has advantages over Jones pretty much everywhere, but his odds reflect that. He's a big favourite. What I would say is Jones is a much more live underdog than Trinaldo, because both these guys are roughly the same size. Jones is the younger one. Barcelos might be starting to show signs of decline, and I feel Jones is a lot more dangerous on the feet than Trinaldo at this stage in their careers. So I do feel Jones is a live underdog here. I'm not going to be betting this fight. I don't want to bet Barcelos because I think the Victor Henry fight is a big enough red flag for us to just proceed with caution here and keep an open mind about the potential that fight might have signalled the start of a decline in an aging bantamweight. On top of that, Barcelos doesn't have the best fight IQ. He doesn't grapple enough at times when he should grapple. And like I say, Trevin Jones is dangerous on the feet. So for those reasons, I'm not interested in betting Barcelos as a big favourite. But I'm also not interested in betting Jones as a big underdog because he doesn't really have any advantages anywhere. Aside from Barcelos underperforming, and aside from Jones landing a big shot and flash KOing Barcelos, Jones is probably going to get outstruck and outgrappled. And I don't want to bet on, a flash KO in this fight because, like we said, Barcelos has never been knocked out. Maybe Jones is the first guy to do it, but obviously based on, everything I've discussed in this breakdown is not that likely. So I hope you found that breakdown useful. It's an interesting fight. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And we will now move on to the next matchup, which is going to be Don Shainis against Super Sadiq Yusuff. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Yusuff is the biggest favourite on the card at average odds of around 1.10, which is going to be minus 1,000 for an implied probability of 91%. And if we take a look at the odds on his opponent, Don Shainis, making his UFC debut, he's around an average of 7.50, which is going to be plus 650 for an implied probability of 13%. So Shainis is 31 years old, 5'6", with a 66.5-inch reach. Yusuff is 29 years old, 5'9", with a 71-inch reach. So both guys roughly the same age, roughly the same age. Yusuff a little bit taller and has a nice 4-inch reach advantage, which will be a big bonus for him in this fight because he's primarily a striker, and Yusuff knows how to use that reach. So this is a classic striker versus grappler matchup. Sadiq Yusuff is a very, fast, powerful, athletic, explosive, technical striker, and Shainis is he's kind of like a Team Alpha male type fighter. He's got that small, compact, muscular body type, and he's predominantly a wrestler. So this is a classic striker versus grappler matchup, and for that reason, it is a very, 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 very difficult stylistic matchup for Shainis, and of course, his odds reflect that. What I'm going to do is play a bit of footage here of Shainis for you. This is his fight against Quinton Weiland from all the way back in November 2021. The dates of the way the dates are different in the UK. We put the month and the day the other way around. So sometimes, if I'm not fully concentrated when I look at the date, it throws me off a little bit. But I think that's November. Anyway, this is from his fight back in 2021 against Quinton Weiland. So as I'm breaking this one down for you, you can watch a little bit of footage on Mr. Shainis, who's in the blue gloves. So classic striker versus grappler matchup, which is bad news for Shainis, because we know Sadiq Yusuff has got really good takedown defense. He's very, very difficult to take down. And even if you do take Yusuff down, he's one of these guys that is incredibly difficult to hold down. As soon as you take Yusuff down, he pops back up to his feet like a spring. Really difficult to get a guy like Yusuff down and hold him down. And of course, he's got a size advantage in this fight as well, which is going to make it even more difficult for Shainis to take Yusuff down and hold him down. You can see there what type of fighter Shainis is, and you can see what he's trying to do. Within 30 seconds, closed the distance, grabbed the hold of Wineland, picked him up, slammed him on the ground, and that's what he's going to be looking to do to Yusuff, which, like I say, is going to be very difficult because Yusuff's very difficult to take down. If you take him down, very, very good at working his way back up to his feet. Yusuff's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is also pretty good. He trains at predominantly grappling-based gym, so even though Yusuff is a striker, he's got a pretty decent base in grappling to fall back on. So with Shainis being the grappler and Yusuff having the skill set to neutralise that grappling, it's very likely that Yusuff's going to be able to decide where this fight takes place. And with Yusuff being a striker, we know he likes to stand and bang. And he is a significantly better striker than Shainis. He's faster, more technical, more powerful. He should light Wineland up on the feet and absolutely dominate him. It should not be a contest on the feet. Yusuff is levels and levels and levels and levels above Wineland. Well, obvious levels above Shainis, sorry, and levels above Wineland. But it's a difficult fight for betting because obviously Yusuff's odds are extremely steep. So all of his advantages in this fight are reflected in the odds. There's just no value there. You can't bet Yusuff in this odds range because we know for how good Yusuff is, there's always going to be risk factors in every fight. And the one thing that I don't like about Yusuff is that he is very reckless. He has this kill or be killed style. He's one of these guys that just comes out the gate super aggressive and will put himself in harm's way to try and take his opponent out. He's one of these guys that just wants finishes. He wants to put on entertaining fights, and he's got no problem putting himself in danger in order to achieve that goal. As a result, we've seen Sadiq Yusuff rocked, wobbled, dropped in many of his past fights. And as a result, he's always risky to bet on because you know he's going to come out the gate super aggressive, look to get into big exchanges with Shainis. And while, yes, Yusuff is a much better striker than Shainis, again, it only takes one shot to land in MMA to knock your opponent out. And Shainis could land something, it's not impossible. And with the odds range that Yusuff is in, there's just very, very little upside in betting a fighter because the return is so small that you're going to get if you bet a guy like Yusuff. So, great stylistic matchup for Yusuff. He should win very easily. He's better than Shainis everywhere. Yusuff's probably a better grappler as well, to be honest. But with Yusuff's recklessness, very, very difficult to bet him. But of course, I'm not interested in betting Shainis because, again, just like with Trevin Jones, just like with Francisco Trinaldo, they don't really have a legit path to victory other than landing a bomb and knocking their opponent out, which for all the reasons we've described is not that likely here or in those other matchups. So now let's talk about the next fight, which is going to be Daniel Santos against John Castaneda, which is one of the most interesting fights on the card. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Daniel Santos is the underdog at average odds of around 2.55, which is going to be plus 155 for an implied probability of 39%. If we take a look at the odds on John Castaneda, he is around an average of 1.54, which is going to be minus 185 for an implied probability of 65%. So Castaneda, 30 years old, 5'6", with a 69-inch reach. Daniel Santos, 27 years old, 5'7", with a 67-inch reach. So both guys roughly the same age, roughly the same size, although Santos is a bit younger, so there's more scope for him improving from fight to fight than Castaneda, who's had a lot more fights and is a bit older at that stage of his career where you'd expect him to start to plateau now. And this fight is also taking place at a 140-pound catch weight instead of the 135-pound bantamweight limit that these guys have fought at in the past. But they're both roughly the same size. It's not like either of them is going to have a major size advantage in this one, so I don't think that is going to be too much of a factor in this fight. If anything, both guys might look better without having to cut as much weight as they usually do. So this is an interesting fight because when I look at odds like this and I see a fighter at reasonably big favourite odds that Castaneda is at, when I research a matchup like this, I would expect Castaneda to have some pretty notable advantages. For him to be this big of a favourite, he should either be a better grappler or a better striker than Santos. When I research this fight though, I can't find any major advantages for Castaneda in this fight. So for me, these odds are way off, and I've bet Daniel Santos this weekend. Now, I haven't bet Daniel Santos because I have a really strong read on this fight or because I think Santos is going to win. I actually have no idea what's going to happen in this matchup. Don't have a strong read on it at all. But this is one of those fights where I'm simply just letting the odds do the work for me. When I see odds like this, one guy decent-sized underdog, one guy decent-sized favourite, when I watch the footage, in order for those odds to be justified, it needs to be glaringly obvious to me what the big favourite does better than the big underdog. And if there's nothing obvious there, there's always going to be value on the underdog. So I think Santos is a good value bet this weekend. He's not a confident bet. I don't feel that confident he's going to win. But I think these odds should be way closer to even money than they actually are, which is probably the reason why Santos' odds have been steadily declining this week. I do think the odds are quite a bit off on this fight, and I'm surprised that the odds haven't declined more than they already have. Because Santos is pretty decent, man. I think this is likely to be razor close, go to a decision, and it could go either way. I don't see either guy dominating this fight. I think this is one of those fights that's got fight of the night written all over it. It should be wild. And one of the reasons why I do like a bet on Santos this weekend is that he's training with a really good team. If we scroll down to this picture here, we can see he's training with the champ, Charles Oliveira, the uncrowned king in the division, alongside guys like Felipe Arantes and Thomas Almeida. You can see a picture of him with Charles Oliveira there. You can see a picture of him with, if we just scroll down a bit further, where is it? Have I missed it? I've probably missed it, right? There he is with Thomas Almeida. So he's training at a good team, and iron sharpens iron. Santos has only had 11 pro fights. He's already very good for someone with 11 pro fights, and at the age of 27 years old, should be making big improvements from fight to fight. So I think there's a lot of upside in betting on Daniel Santos this weekend. But as I break this one down from a striking and grappling perspective, I'm going to play a little bit of footage for you of Santos in the background. Santos is the guy in the red shorts here. So let's get into this one. Let's break it down. So in terms of, we'll talk about grappling first of all, because both these guys are strikers, so I would expect this fight to take place on the feet. When it comes to grappling, neither guy is a grappler, right? Both guys are predominantly strikers, so I do think they're going to want to keep this fight standing. But even if Castaneda did come into this fight with a grappling heavy game plan, Santos' takedown offense and ground game is pretty good. Castaneda's grappling's not amazing. You see here, Santos has been taken down by a strong combat Sambo guy, but he does a good job of scrambling his way over to the cage and starting to work his way back up to his feet. Castaneda's level of grappling isn't enough to cause Santos a problem. Bearing in mind, this guy is in the gym every day with Charles Oliveira, who's one of the best grapplers in the lightweight division. So I don't see Castaneda being able to cause this guy a problem on the ground. If anything, Santos might be the better grappler out of the two. We don't know for sure because there's not tons of footage available on Santos' grappling. But from what we've seen, and the gym he trains at, who he's training with every day, iron sharpens iron, Castaneda's not great on the ground. I'm sure Santos is going to be able to handle himself just fine there. And bear in mind, his takedown offense, ground games look pretty good in this fight against a really skilled, strong combat Sambo guy. And this fight was all the way back in January 2019. That was a long time ago, man. Santos is only 27 years old. You know, back in 2019, he might have been 24, 25 years old back then. So he's bound to have improved so much since this fight against, Kalamov. So, yeah, even though there are some mistakes he makes, his grappling takedown offense doesn't look totally bulletproof in this fight. Imagine how much better it is now 3 years later when he's had 3 years of improving to do, training side by side with the champ. And you can just see this guy moves very well. He's very technical. He's very well-rounded, very aggressive. You know, this is him at 24, 25 years old. Imagine how good he looks at this stage in his career at 27. Has this died? Brilliant. This has died. Oh well. It's dead. We'll move on. We'll just have to look at my face instead. Sucks, right? Okay. Let's talk about how these two guys match up when it comes to striking. So when it comes to striking, they've got very, very different styles of striking. Castaneda, predominantly boxing-based style. Daniel Santos has got that classic Shuto box style where he comes forward, takes control of the center of the octagon in that Muay Thai stance and just looks to overwhelm his opponents with pressure, aggression, and a real big diversity of attacks. Big combinations, big flashy kicks. He's very technical, very aggressive, moves well, popping his shots, speed, accuracy. I like Santos on the feet. He's pretty nasty on the feet. I think the big difference between these two is the speed and the defense of Santos. While Santos is very aggressive, it's controlled aggression, and he's a lot better defensively than Castaneda is. So Santos has got the opportunity in this fight to land a cleaner, harder, more significant, more damaging shots, because Castaneda is not quite as sharp, doesn't read doesn't read his opponents quite as well as Santos, and is more prone to eating clean, hard shots and getting dinged by big shots. Defensively, Castaneda is not the best, and while Santos isn't amazing defensively either, he's a lot better than Castaneda. So in this fight, I just think Santos is going to be able to give Castaneda problems on the feet. I think he's going to be the aggressor. I think he's going to control the center of the octagon. And I think he's just going to be landing the flashier, faster, more technical, more impactful strikes in this, which will give him a great chance of winning a decision here. So like I say, this is one of those bets where I don't have a confident lean either way. I don't have a strong read on this. There's not tons of recent footage available on Santos, but from what I've seen, I think he could be pretty good. Castaneda doesn't blow me away. You know, he's a decent wrestle boxer, reasonably skilled, but there's nothing he's bringing to the table here which is particularly scary for Santos. There's nothing Castaneda does really, really well that Santos is going to have to worry about. You know, Castaneda's a tough, well-rounded guy with a good gas tank, and that makes him a tough matchup for Santos. But Santos is a tough, well-rounded guy with a good gas tank as well. So, you know, it's kind of a fair fight in that sense. So if I were capping this fight, I would have it in the even money odds range. I don't understand why Santos is a reasonably big underdog here, which is why I'm betting him. But that doesn't mean I'm confident he's going to win. I'm purely letting the odds do the work for me here. And if the odds were the other way round, if Santos was 1.53, you know, in that minus 200 range, and Castaneda was 2.50 in that plus 150 range, I would bet Castaneda in this fight. I'm not betting Santos here because I think he's going to win. I'm betting him because there's value in his odds, and I'd easily take Castaneda this weekend if you gave me the same odds I can bet Santos for, because I think this fight's going to be razor close and it could go either way. But it's an interesting fight, in my opinion. Fight of the night written all over it. One of the most interesting fights on the card. Let me know what you think in the comments below as we move on to breaking down the final fight that I want to talk about in this video, which is going to be Mike Davis against Vyacheslav Borschev. And don't forget, if you like the breakdown videos for these main event fights and you want to watch breakdown videos for all the prelim fights on this card, head on over to my website, MMABettingTips.com, where you'll find breakdown videos for every single fight on every single UFC card on there. Link in the description below. You'll also find the VIP chat room where you can talk to myself, other members of the community on a daily basis. I'm online like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. The grind never ends, man. And yeah, man, I'm always working. So if you want to chat to me about upcoming fights, betting strategies, betting theories, I'm in there all the time, man, as well as a lot of other members of the community. So let's get into this one. Mikey Davis against Vyacheslav Borschev. Mike Davis is 29 years old, 6 foot tall, with a 72.5-inch reach. Vyacheslav Borschev, 30 years old, 5 foot 11, with a 69-inch reach. So both guys roughly the same age, roughly about the same size. Davis has a nice 3-inch reach advantage, which is cool because he does fight long. He's very technical on the feet and he knows how to use it. And, you know, having a 3-inch reach advantage is better than not having a 3-inch reach advantage, right? So interesting stylistic matchup, this one. Let's take a look at the odds. Obviously, Mikey Davis is the favorite at average odds. Quite a big odds spread on this one. So Mike Davis is the favorite at average odds of about, I would say, 1.55, which is going to be minus 182 for an implied probability of 65%. If we take a look at the odds on Vyacheslav Borschev, he's around an average of 2.50, which is going to be plus 250 for, plus 150 for an implied probability of 40%. So straight off the bat, I am betting Mike Davis this weekend for similar reasons that I recommended a bet on Rodrigo Nascimento on the last card to beat Tanner Boser. Shout out to Nascimento. He came through for us in a big way. I hope you guys, tailed that bet because we hit a nice underdog winner on Nascimento. But my reasoning for betting Nascimento in that fight is the same reasoning why I'm betting on Mike Davis in this one. Obviously, the risk to reward ratio is different because Nascimento was a nice underdog. Davis is a decent sized favourite, but the same sort of logic applies in that this is a mixed martial arts contest and it can take place standing up and on the ground. The days are gone where you can get away with having huge weaknesses in your skill set and get away with it. Vyacheslav Borschev, very similar to Tanner Boser on the last card, has absolutely no takedown defense and no ground game at all. If you put this guy on his back, very easy to hold him down, very easy to rack up a lot of top control. So even though Mike Davis is predominantly a striker, he can grapple. He is a decent offensive wrestler. And the fact that Davis has a clear, easy and obvious path to victory here means I have to bet him. Because if he chooses to grapple in this fight, he will absolutely dominate Borschev. Borschev is absolutely awful on the ground. Now, of course, he may have improved since his last fight against Mark Diakiese. It is possible. He does train at a predominantly grappling-based gym at Team Alpha Male. Although it is worth noting that a lot of the fighters that have gone to train at Team Alpha Male over the last few years haven't really improved their takedown defense and ground game that much. If you look at Macy Barber, she's still quite easy to hold down. She's been training at Alpha Male for a while. If you look at, Song Yadong, he's been, pretty bad on the ground for many, many years now. And while he is improving, he's improving at a very slow rate. So even if Borschev is improving at Team Alpha Male, it probably isn't enough to tighten up all the weaknesses that he showed against Diakiese. And Diakiese wrote the blueprint on how to beat Borschev. Take this guy down, lay on top of him. There's nothing he can do about it. And Mike Davis absolutely 100% has the level of grappling to do that to Borschev. The problem with Davis is that he's similar to Ronnie Barcelos in many ways, in that he doesn't use his grappling as much as he should. He's a decent offensive wrestler, reasonably skilled grappler, heavy top game, but he's also one of these stubborn strikers that wants to stand and bang, doesn't grapple as much as he should, which is disappointing. He's actually got a nasty habit of taking guys down and shooting really nice takedown attempts, only to then immediately let them back up to their feet, which is really frustrating. It's a giant waste of energy, and it lets his opponents off the hook big time. But if Mike Davis comes into this fight well prepared with a good game plan, good strategy, and he's done his homework on Borschev, he can look at the blueprint laid out by Diakiese and give himself an easy night's work. If Davis comes into this fight with a grappling heavy game plan, this will be an absolute cakewalk. It will be Davis's easiest easiest night's work of his life. Based on past performances, it's not that likely he will come in with a grappling heavy game plan, but the fact that Borschev has such a big weakness there that can be exploited makes me want to bet Davis this weekend. So do your own research on that one, take a look for yourself, and that's the primary reason why I'm betting Davis. The sweetener is that both these guys are primarily strikers, but not only does Davis have a huge advantage on the ground, he also has an advantage on the feet. He's a better striker than Borschev as well. He's more technical, throws a more diverse range of attacks. He's just the more skilled striker out of the two. Borschev is one of these tough, scrappy, aggressive, relentless guys that just looks to turn fights into a brawl, turn fights into a dogfight, and just out-tough his opponents. But we've seen Davis in these kind of matchups before. Mason Jones tried to do the same thing to him, and Davis was able to pick up the win. The fight against Sadiq Yusuff on the Contender Series 4 years ago was an absolute war as well. So we've seen Davis in these dogfights in the past, and we know that he doesn't fold. We know that he doesn't break. He's tough as nails as well. So when the going gets tough in this one, I think Davis is going to be able to hang in there and just outclass Borschev with his superior skill set. Now, there is one interesting quirk to Davis in that. I'll start again in explaining this. So basically, every fighter in the UFC, even if you're a cardio machine, you're going to be tired by the third round of a fight, right? Corey Sandhagen looked phenomenal on the last card against Song Yadong, but I'd imagine in round 3 he was probably feeling pretty tired, even if he didn't show it. This is because you can't compete at the elite level of sports and perform at a high level of output for 10-15 minutes without feeling tired, right? It's impossible. Fighters are only human. But some fighters are better at hiding it than others. Some fighters have got a very good poker face. You never would have known Sandhagen was probably tired in that third round last week. Davis is one of these guys that doesn't do a very good job of hiding when he gets tired. So at times in his fights, it'll look like he's gassed very bad, and then out of nowhere, he'll uncork a really fast combination and look really sharp, which completely catches you by surprise because he does things that you wouldn't expect a guy to look that tired would be able to do. So Davis is one of these guys that's very perceptive. He often looks like he's gassing out, but I'm sure he is gassing out. But the point being, even when Davis starts to slow down and get tired, he can still fight pretty effectively. Now, Davis does slow down as fights wear on, but it's not a deal breaker for me in this fight because Borschev also slows down as fights wear on. So the reason why I'm still happy to bet Davis here is because if both these guys slow down together, when they're both tired, Davis is still going to be the more technical, more effective striker. And so the reason why I'm betting Davis this weekend, to summarise everything, that he's got a big advantage on the ground, he's the more technical striker, and even though he slows down, Borschev does as well. So it kind of cancels out, shouldn't be too much of an issue. The risk factor here is that Borschev is a tough, crazy Russian who's very aggressive and has big power in his hands. But we've seen Davis in dogfights in the past, and he's hung in there and coped or okay with a really aggressive opponent that looks to take him out. So good stylistic matchup for Davis. I think he wins this. Hopefully he comes through for me. And yeah, that is going to be it for this breakdown. Thank you very much for watching. Please hit the like button if you haven't already and subscribe. Hope you make loads of cash this weekend. don't forget, I've got a bonus video dropping on the channel tomorrow. If you like football and betting on sports, you might want to check that out. I think it might be of interest to you. But for now, have a great week. Have a great week off. Go do something nice next weekend. Treat your lady. And we'll be back soon with another breakdown video for the UFC. Nice one, guys. Love you all. Take care. Bye.